Hi, welcome to Sistery Untold. We are your sisters in house, Marva
and Sabrina.
And on this podcast, we look at sistery through the eyes of sisterhood. We look at history through the eyes of history.
Very creative, original take on history.
Hi, welcome to Sistery Untold. We are your sisters in house, Marva
and Sabrina.
And on this podcast, we look at history through the eyes of sisterhood.
So today we're, as you can see and I can see, we're recording on Zoom, which is so interesting. I feel so self-conscious.
We recorded on WhatsApp last time.
No, I know, but we can see each other.
I know, we could see each other last time we recorded as well.
I wasn't looking at you.
Okay, well, it was my episode, so you should have been looking at me.
Sorry, I did not even know.
You definitely did know.
I was looking at you. I have no recollection of that.
It was on your phone.
I know it was on my phone. Okay, anyways, here we are.
We'll talk about this another time. Tune into part 3 where we just could discuss whether we hopped on FaceTime or not.
Okay, anyway. We're here face to face with each other and soon to be face to screen with a guest.
If that's the case, we should all be face to screen because you and I are not face to face. We're face to screen as well.
Anyways, Marva, please leave all your interruptions until the end of this programming.
Just do it right. I mean, then I wouldn't have to. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay. Today we're speaking with the actress, voice artist, and writer, Claire Louise Amias. We're going to be talking to Claire about two of the women in her play, Oranges and Ink. This play was based on Aphra Behn and Nell Gwyn. If you guys have been listening to our podcast for literally any amount of time, you've probably heard me bring up Aphra Behn because I'm obsessed with her and I try to fit her into almost every conversation. And this play, Oranges and Ink, was written and performed in 2019, and it won an Off West End On-Com award in 2020.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, amazing. And it's available to watch for free online at scenesaver.co.uk. We'll make sure to put that link in the description of this episode. So if you want to stop now and go watch that or watch that after, or whatever order in which you want to do things. This play also appeared in a double bill with Claire's 2016 one-woman play about Aphra Behn. So you can learn even more about her. But yeah, without further ado.
With further ado.
Okay, give me your ado.
With further ado. This is part 2. It will sound like it's part 1 because we recorded it before we recorded part 1.
Yes.
So, although you may now have heard part 1, at that time, we had not heard part 1. Does that make sense?
So awkward for everyone involved right now. But yes.
Because there's going to be things that we're like, oh my gosh, like that's so shocking. But like, we literally will have talked about it last week.
Yeah.
So
we're not fake. This was genuinely new information for us at that moment.
Yeah.
However, last week, you guys heard all about Aphra Behn and Nell Gwyn, so it's not new information to you. But we do get some new insights into their relationship together in the context of this play and also just in general. But if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, definitely do. If you just want the basic facts kind of their lives, definitely get that so you can have that kind of foundation.
Yeah, or listen to part 2 and then part 1, just as we have done.
Yes. Any more ado?
No, I don't think so. I think that's all my ados.
Okay, then the only thing to do is get started. That was really good. Let's get started with our conversation.
Is really good the word I would choose to describe.
You're superb, incredible, witty, ingenious. Lots of great words.
Okay. You're not Aphra Behn, but
okay. Anyways, Now I can't get the word ado out of my mind. I can't think of a different transition. Here we go. Claire
Let's
Louise.
go to our first season transition and let's dive in.
Oh yeah, let's dive in. Hi Claire, how are you doing?
Hi Sabrina, hi Marva. Yeah, really good, thanks. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Before we get started talking about the play, could you just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about the work you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm Claire Louise Amias. I have been an actor for quite a few years, and more recently I've been a playwright as well. And I did an MA at RADA, finishing in 2011, and my final piece there was about Aphra Behn. I got a bit obsessed with her then at that point and started researching her, reading all her plays. And then in 2016, I wrote a one-woman play about Aphra Behn's spying years, because she was a spy for King Charles II in the Dutch Wars. And then I felt that I hadn't really kind of filled in all the gaps for a person's life with this one person show. And so then I wrote Oranges and Ink, inspired by the possible friendship between Nell Gwyn and Aphra Behn, which is, you know, there's little pieces of information here and there in the various literatures of the time, the satires of the time about their friendship and what they got up to.
I'm so excited to hear this. I don't know really anything about either of them. So I know Sabrina knows a bit, but this is all new to me. So very excited.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm glad you share my obsession with Aphra Behn. I discovered her, I think, my freshman year of college. And it was like, what? Like, she's a spy and a poet and queer and like lived in the West Indies and like all of these things. I was like, she's the coolest person ever. How is no one talking about her all the time?
That is exactly how I felt when I was writing the one-person show. I was thinking, why don't we learn about this woman at school? Why don't, you know, why isn't she a well-known figure, you know? So, why isn't there a feature film? Why isn't there a blockbuster, actually?
Yeah, honestly,
maybe
you can write it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a podcast episode on Stuff You Missed in History class about her, which I think it makes sense. It's on that podcast. It's Stuff You Missed in History class. Like, we probably should have known about her. But okay, yeah. And then I actually don't know a lot about Nell Gwyn. I've studied a little bit of Restoration women in theater. So obviously she came up, and I know that she's kind of crazy in the best way possible. But this play definitely helped me learn a lot of like what their possible relationship could be like, and also like imagine what their personalities were like. But could you just tell, especially Marva and our listeners, just generally about who Aphra and Nell were, and a little bit about their careers and the world they were living in?
So I'll start with Aphra Behn first, because I know the most about her, really, because I've written the 2 shows about her. So yeah, as I say, she was a spy in the Dutch Wars, but before that, her history again is quite murky. So as we know, I'm sure you've come across this before in your She Story, you know, the sort of female histories. There are a lot of gaps, unless history relates to a man, usually. In some way. So we have the most likely upbringing and place of birth for Aphra Behn was Kent. Now I live in Kent, not far from Canterbury, which is I seem to be following around, because later on in Oranges and Ink we talk about Nell Gwyn, and she was living in Windsor for a time, so I lived there for a time. So these plays seem to be kind of based around places that I've been. Anyway, back to Aphra Behn. So most likely she was lower middle class, and so she didn't come from a wealthy family. So this is the big seismic difference between Aphra Behn and other female writers at the time, because of course there were female writers, but they were usually rich. And so the big thing about Aphra Behn was that she was the first woman to earn a living through writing, through her, rather than it being a hobby or a pastime. So it
And
was.
sorry, what was she writing? She was writing like books or like novels or?
She wrote everything, kind of. I mean, she wrote poetry. She wrote potentially one of the first ever novels. People oral about what was the first ever novel, but and also you know, Orinoco, the novel. So so that is an interesting novel because it reads like it's an account of her life. Now we're used to that now, but at that point it was a very unusual thing to have a fictional story, a fictionalized story that was written in the first person. And so people, and I'm sure Afra knew this, sort of took that for granted, that this was her story, her account of this trip to the West Indies, because she had been to the West Indies. And so in that, she says that her father was a lieutenant general in the Navy, and sort of, in a way, was that her rewriting her history, because she was then, at that point, moving in court circles. It was useful to kind of create a different background. But, you know, she didn't start writing straight away. She needed, her father died of whatever reason, and the family had no major breadwinner. And so they went off to the West Indies, whether it was to do with her father, which is likely not to be. He's more likely to be a barber from Kent, and not a lieutenant in the Navy, more likely because she had been brought up, because her mother was a wet nurse to the Culpeper family, Thomas Culpeper, who was a young gentleman. She was brought up with almost as a brother, and she's a sister. And so because of that, she learnt to write. She was given an education because she was, you know, growing up with him, with the family. And she got to meet people who were in power, essentially, and could help her get her first job, which potentially, and historians disagree with this, lots of different books I read about Africa, but potentially she went to Suriname to spy. So that was her first job. Her first way of earning money was as a spy.
That is a very intense first job, I feel like. Like, not McDonald's or like whatever.
Yeah. And this was potentially about this, the person who was in charge of Suriname had been mismanaging things, essentially. And so she was, you know, as a sort of, you know, meek and mild, you know, woman rather than a man sort of entering the colony, she was not suspected. And so she would feed back information about the misdeeds in Suriname.
Wow, I hadn't heard that theory, I guess, that she was a spy in Suriname. I don't know. I think I also kind of just mixed her real life with the book and thought she was like on a family kind of trip.
Yes. That's it. So that's likely not to be true, but there's a question of whether she allowed people to think that, because it helped her. You know, it was certainly help at the time, at a point when essentially the Arts Council was royalty or aristocrats who had, you know, money to pay for people to carry on writing, you know, or people pay for a play.
Yeah. If no one's read a novel before, they don't know that you would lie. And especially early novels are all like a very true history of this thing that happened to me in real life. Like they're kind of over the top about being true. Yeah, interesting.
So was her going on this like family trip that wasn't actually a family trip, but she was really a spy, was like the family trip her like cover story, or she just like completely made it up afterwards?
Well, this is the question. I don't think historians have actually, and this is why I thought she was so, an intriguing character to research, but B, she was a very difficult one to write a play about, because of course you want some hard facts. However, I focused on the spying mission part, not in Suriname, but in the Dutch wars, because that part is well documented. So that was why I decided to choose that part. So after Suriname, she comes back to London, and the same person who's a spy master, Thomas Killigrew, is also the guy who runs a theatre, okay, the King's Theatre for King Charles. King Charles has come back to the throne in the Restoration, and he's brought back the playhouses after the Civil War and the Puritans, and dancing and singing and playhouses were all stopped. And suddenly Charles II comes back and he's a real womanizer, and he loves theatre and, you know, all of these things, and women. And the playhouses open again, and he opens these 2 playhouses, the Kings and the Dukes. And so Afra Ben is working as a copier first. So she's come back from Suriname, and so this, you know, she asks for a job. So okay, I've done this little mission for you. Can I? I've done you a favor, essentially. Probably not made very much money. And he gives her a copying job because she can write. And so she is working, copying, and also some journalistic work as well early on. And at that moment, it's at that point when she's just moved to London, really, and she's quite young at this point. She's only 24, 25. She's already been off to Suriname at the age of 23. Wow. You know, 24. She met Nell Gwyn. Okay. So we know that they have some relationship because her play, The Famed Courtesans, that she wrote much later, that Oranges and Ink focuses the action around. My play. The dedication is to Nell Gwyn, and it's and it's a very florid dedication. So that actually is part. It's actually within the play. If you've seen it online, so the bit where she's really going over the top, flattering her, that section is actually the beginning. That is the dedication that she wrote. So that's the actual wording. So Nell in my play is going, yeah, I think you're laying it on a bit thick now, you know. That's from the real dedication. It's like the most beautiful, the most clever, the most talented, all of this. Really laying it on. And then so this is where it gets interesting. So we've got this sort of dedication, but we've also got these satires, these lampoons, these sort of free sheets that poked fun at people at the time, a bit like in Bridgerton. You've got
Lady Whistledown.
Yeah, there you go, a little bit like that. So sort of written anonymously, and you'd have these. There were quite a few of them as well about this story about Afra Ben helping Nell, who had at that time already started relations with King Charles II. She's still an actress, but she's already, you know, sleeping with King Charles II. And she's one of many mistresses at this point. And as the story goes in these lampoons, because Afra had been to the West Indies, she knew a lot about different plants and herbs that could heal or cause ructions in the body. And so Nell asked Afra to help her. And at this point, you know, Nell's quite important, you know, the rising star. And, you know, Afra's just starting out really as a writer, even though she's 10 years older than Nell. And she asked her for some help, and so Afra helps her lace these capes that she's got with this laxative.
Oh gosh.
And then invites her rival actress and courtesan to the king over for tea, because she's heard that Moll has got a date with the king
Oh no.
that afternoon. And she invites her over for tea, one of her fellow actresses, but from a rival. She's from the Dukes, so she's from the rival theatre as well. So
Okay.
she's the comedy star from there. She's the Nell Gwyn of the Dukes, you know.
Wow, so they're like
Yeah.
rivals on two levels, like in their
Yeah.
personal life and professional life.
Yeah.
But why would she go to even tea if like my like arch rival was like, do you want to come over for tea? I'd be like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they have to, and this happens in life now, doesn't it? People have to keep, you know,
Yeah.
this,
Keep up appearances and
keep up appearances. They need to keep in good favour with the king, so they can't let the king know that they're not getting on.
yeah.
You know, and you know they have to get on with each other in society. But she also, you know, sounds, you know, there's quite a cutthroat element if this is sort of
Yeah.
true. That at that point, you know, after tea, after they've been laced, it was explosive, and essentially,
Oh gosh.
poor old Mole and poor old King Charles II, actually. But apparently, Mole was pensioned off after this incident. She was given quite a lot of money.
So it like ruined her relationship with the king, like permanently.
Yeah, but she was given a pension. Like she was sent off with a lot of money, much more money than Nell ever got, actually.
Really?
Like, yeah, she had a child with Mole had a child with Mole Davis had a child with Charles II. So you know she was looked after. But essentially, Nell, with the help of Afra, got the rival out of the way.
Yeah.
That must be a really close friendship, honestly, because I wouldn't just ask anyone, hey, can you help me like basically drug this woman to give her like to ruin her relationship? Just they must have been pretty close then.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, there's so much missing about the personal lives of these women. I've looked at the relationships that I put down in Afra Ben's plays. I don't know if you know the plays, like The Rover is the most well-known one, isn't it? You've got these lovely sisterly relationships in that, actually, haven't you? They're also quite, you know, they're quite sharp and kind of real. They're not idealized women in any way. And so, you know, you've got this, you can get what you can glean of Afra Ben's personality from her plays and the way she writes women, I think.
Yeah, so that kind of what you use to shape, because I love the relationship they have in your play. It's like very playful, but also really like sincere and sweet at times, like and sometimes really angry and explosive at each other. So did you kind of, since there's not that much information about them, I guess biographically, did you take a lot of that from different plays and different characters and stuff?
I had more information actually about Nell Gwyn and her rivalries. So this is the thing, because of course this was the subject of gossip pages, as I said. So you got quite a lot about her, about Mole Davis, Louise de Carouel, who wasn't a courtesan or an actress. She was a lover, quite a rich, was aristocratic. Hortense Mancini as well, another amazing woman who was a kind of rival to the king as well, was also one of his lovers, you know, and then other actresses who were around at the time as well. So, you know, you've got a lot of information, sort of gossipy information, if you like, about Nell. And the kind of person and the kind of relationship she was having with women. But I thought she's got to have had another side to her, you know, because I think we hear a lot about the gossipy, naughty, sprightly, sexy Nell, you know, and they're all in England. You've got all the pubs named after her, you know. She's a kind of iconic figure. You've got, even in the 1970s, there's some pretty awful adverts for Tango talking about oranges, things like that. Ooh, naughty, you know, all this stuff. Like really cringeworthy. You know, she's a sort of well-known figure, but she must have had other sides to her. She was a mother. She had 2 children, one died. She wasn't allowed to see them, you know.
Really? From Why wasn't she allowed to see them?
Because essentially she was a working class,
Mm,
or she was a courtesan.
mhm.
It's not a posh version of one, but she was kept away from her children. They got looked after by tutors and wet
Because were
nurses.
they the children of the king?
Yes, so these are the children
Okay.
of the king. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So trying to show this other side to her as well, I think. And
Mhm.
so with both women, I'm trying to see the main genesis. We've got two things. We've got the lampoons, where it sounds like, as you say, it's like having a deep secret like that. Well, not a deep secret, because obviously if it was true, everybody heard about it.
Yeah.
But it's something that it's taking a risk, isn't it?
Mhm.
Essentially drugging another mistress of the king.
Mhm.
That's a real risk. So somebody putting themselves out for you majorly. And then we've got this slightly overly excessive kind of flattery in the prologue. And so you're trying to think, okay, what might this relationship be? Knowing the things about these women, Aphra Ben was called a hermaphrodite because she acted like a man as people saw it,
Mm.
because she wrote, she did a man's job, and she liked women as well as
Mhm.
men,
Mhm.
and she was outspoken and rude, not
And she
more
loves
than
poison people.
and well, that I'm not sure she loved that, but I think I'm sure if that was true, that was something to do with gaining potential currency in the future, wasn't it? You're helping the
Mhm.
king's mistress.
Mhm.
So what I was
Yeah.
trying to get across is this: they're getting something out of each other as well as this friendship. So they've got friendship, but they fulfill a need for each other. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of how friendships work in a way, or can work, even if it's like a completely spiritual thing. The
Mhm.
person who listens to me and gives me sympathy, or the person who is actually who I'd rather be like that person, or there's
Yeah.
something that we give each other, isn't there?
Mhm. Yeah. And I guess they both have like this similar, well, maybe you can tell us more about Nell Gwynn's background, but they're both like working class women who have like kind of clawed their way to the top through like the world of theater. So they have like a lot in common, I guess. But yeah, could you tell us about Nell's background, and also the thing with the oranges, like why it's oranges and ink? Because I know that's something that has to do with like her early career in the stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Nell's upbringing was even rougher and readier than Nell Gwynn's, Aphra Ben's, really.
Mhm.
Um, she grew up around prostitutes. Her father died at an early age, and her way out of becoming a whore, essentially, was to become an orange girl at the theatre. So you would turn up and at the theatre, and you would sell oranges to the people who were the audience that night. And essentially it was her sort of internship, her badly paid job, that sort of led her to get acting roles. Perhaps we don't know the exact terms of how she got into there. Have you watched or read Playhouse Creatures?
No, I haven't.
So in that they have Nell tricking the playhouse owner into allowing her to try out as an actress. So we have Mrs. Betterton goes to talk to Mrs. Betterton, who is the wife of Mr. Betterton, the theatre manager, and says, "Oh, your husband said that I could try out for an acting role." And so she's wanting to please her husband, so she lets her audition and gives her a small part in the play, even though she's, thinking, don't really want an orange, seller. But all right, we'll give her a small part.
Uh-huh.
And then she gets on stage. She's stage struck. She's nervous. but then she manages to make the audience laugh. She can't really remember the lines, but she makes the audience laugh and they love it. And she's pretty and she does a little dance, she does a little dig, and she's applauded. And so, you know, this natural sense for comedy and improvisation, if you like, is what kind of won the hearts and allowed her to become, you know, carry on as an actress. And how good she was as an actress, we don't know.
Oh, really? She was pretty successful though, right? For like a few years.
Yeah, and there are different, you know, I think she would get compared to other actresses who were like more serious actresses, but you know, she'd make fun of sort of serious actresses, you know. She wanted to have a laugh, she wanted to make people enjoy themselves, you know. That was
being like a comedic actress, like in that time period, was it like, because like, you know, people even like nowadays are always like, oh, women aren't funny, and like it's kind of like not as cool to be like a comedian, a female comedian, like it's not as glamorous or whatever, and then being like just like serious actress. In the time period, was it kind of the same, or was it more like acceptable to be a comedic actress? Do you know?
I think you probably got different things out of it. I don't think it was easy being an actress anyway, because you've heard about what used to happen backstage with the gentlemen who were in the audience could pay to watch the actresses dress and undress.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, no, I did not know that.
Yeah, so basically at that point, being an actress was treated as one step up from being a prostitute.
Yeah, I've always heard people say that, but I didn't know it was like built into the career, like even when you're at work. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was more of like how people viewed you on like a social perspective, not that people would literally be able to watch you get dressed and undressed.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is definitely true. Gentlemen paid to watch. Yeah.
Gentlemen are
that's not to say, you know, anything, you know, that was a lot of women were going into the theatre to escape worse, you know.
Yeah.
And at least in the theatre they had the opportunity of being creative and having, this is the other thing, they were allowed to wear their costumes on stage when they went out with the gentlemen. So they might just have terrible, you know, very worn clothes of their own, but they were able to use the sort of cast-offs of the gentry were usually worn on the stage, and they were able to sort of wear them when they went on dates with various rich gentlemen who wanted to take them out. So this was a sort of route to success in a way, if you were a working class woman, which sounds awful, doesn't it? It sounds really awful. But for the women at the time and the way that women were treated, even in marriage.
Yeah, true.
And this is what Aphra Behn wrote about, as you'll know. You know, she wrote about what is the difference between a prostitute and a married woman. You know, they're sold for a price, there's a dowry. You know, they have to please the man, they might not be in love with them. Is marriage about love? And of course she's potentially also never proved exactly, but she wasn't she was called Aphra Johnson and became Aphra Behn. So she either married and widowed, so she was married at some point, or she decided to pretend to be a widower so that she could have the respect of being a married woman, so she could go about with slightly more freedom. But we do know she had a very bad opinion of marriage. So
we don't have any records of her actually getting married, though. We just know her name changed at some point.
Yes. So the idea is that she, and again, historians disagree with this. So some historians just say, yes, she was married to a Dutchman called Mr. Behn, who was a merchant, and that was on the way back. They met on the way back from Suriname, and then he died during the plague. But there is always the option that she might have made it up in this very sort of tumultuous time and said, yes, I'm a widow, I lost my husband. And that would give her a lot more freedom to be independent.
I heard also that it was really like, I guess kind of in a later period, but like pretty common for like particularly like women who worked in sex work, like when they would get into like a relationship with people, it was like for the more working classes, it was more acceptable to like not be married, but then just like live like you are married and be like, yeah, I'm Mrs. Ben, even like though legally you haven't actually done anything, but it was kind of just more like accepted in that like kind of working class rather than like in the upper class where like you had to like be so serious about everything.
About it. Yeah.
I think you know, I'm not a specialist in this, but I think it was pretty serious for women, whatever class you were. Probably less so with the aristocracy, of course, who were, you know, the mistresses of Charles II were able to be a lot more free and easy and open about their, you know, being a lover of the king, because of course there's kudos in that as well. Their husbands might turn a blind eye even, because like, but you're a mistress to the king, so that's all right, you know. You're going to get more cash, you know, more privilege, all of these sort of things. I would say for any woman, it would always be risky not to be married, and it wouldn't be something that would be taken lightly to pretend that you were a widow. But of course, there's no document. There's hardly any documentation then. So if you said that you were a widow, it's a lot easier for people to believe you.
Yeah. And then, do you know much about how Nell and King Charles II's relationship actually started? I'm wondering how old she was as well, because I think she was like 15 when she started acting. So I'm just kind of concerned about that. But yeah, I think how their relationship started and what that was like.
Well, she left the stage in 1670 when she was 20 years old. So she would have been, you know, of legal age anyway when she started the relationship with Charles II. It had been going on for a while. So in 1670, when she's 20 years old, she has been having not even an affair, is it really? She's been seeing, to use a modern word, the king for some years, as well. He's been seeing other women as well, of course, and he's married, you know, but she becomes his official courtesan, if you like, and he gives her a house in Windsor to house her and her offspring. And that's she's in her 20s when she's leaving the theatre for good. She had her last play. She was in Dryden's The Conquest of is it Grenada? I'm not sure of the pronunciation, but
I think I know the play you're talking about.
Yeah, and so that's, and the epilogue. I start off Oranges and Ink with this particular epilogue from this play, because it actually talked about being pregnant and being in the theatre, and the fact that there are no virgins in the theatre. So it's, I'm sure that was written as a kind of, you know, yeah, I'm off to go and be a courtesan to King Charles II, but you know what, you know, everybody's at it in the theatre anyway, you know. So what's the difference? I'm off to go and live in a semi-palace, you know.
Yeah. And was she kind of pressured to leave the theater, or did she just say like, oh, I have enough money now, I don't need to work anymore? Or was it like...
No, she was always reliant. She was never given a big wad of money. She latterly managed to talk Charles into giving her a house in Pall Mall, which was a really big deal at the time. It was very unusual. So this is some years down the road. And that was almost unheard of. But cash, I mean, she owned the house as well. She's a woman that owns the house at that time. That is incredibly unusual. She's not a kept woman who was given a, you know, a monthly allowance. He pays for her rent. He has bought her house and she owns the deeds.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I realize that. That's amazing.
So she, I mean, you know, she was clever, really, and she played the system in any way she could. And, you know, I think about Afra Ben and Nell Gwyn, we could judge them retrospectively for the way that they had to live their lives, but women had no rights at that point, really. You know, they were both in incredibly precarious positions, and they, you know, they got the things that they needed for their, you know, in Nell's case, for her children, you know, that security. And she still, you know, had to make, you know, if she went out of favour with King Charles, she could lose her allowance. Charles was ill, so this features in the play as well. So Charles was ill at one point, everybody thought he was going to die, and they stopped her allowance, even though she'd had 2 children by Charles. They stopped her allowance, Alice, because they said, oh, well, you're not doing your job at the moment, so because he's ill.
It's not her fault she's not doing the job.
I know, he's sick, like in bed. Oh my gosh.
And so this is the link as well between Aphra Behn and her, because Aphra Behn is constantly talking about, she loved to write about either courtesans or wives who are being treated badly by their husbands, being sold or gambled away, like in The Lucky Chance, like it's gambled away by her husband. So it's all about women. It's really early era. She's writing about women being treated as a commodity. And so for me, it seems a natural thing that she wouldn't care about that. You know, in a friend, that would not be an issue. At a certain point, you know, somebody who's trying to hobnob with the nobility and better themselves, if you like, in a way that Aphra Behn was, you know, she might not have done that, but actually, you know, she played the game in a different way. She went, okay, I'm going to be friends with these courtesans and these clever, witty women, and I'm not going to care about morals, because, you know, my moral compass is not the same as most people of that day. You know, so that's why those plays from, you know, that time, from Aphra Behn's, that her plays anyway, seem very modern and fresh in a way, because
definitely
she talks about women in a very funny way.
And I think you have this in the play that, like, she's like, oh, like, I get called a whore too, like, even though she's not a courtesan, she's just a female writer. And I have read some of the, like, satires and, like, prologues and stuff that talk about Aphra Behn, and, like, they're just so scathing for no reason. They're like, she's like this unnatural, like, she-man, like, they're just like, like, not the lip, like, not those words, but like kind of
it's like
thing, like,
they call her hermaphrodite. She's either one or the other, you know.
But I did want to ask you about her sexuality, because I've definitely seen in her poetry, like, that maybe bisexuality or something, but you talked about in the play someone called Emily Price, and I was wondering if you could tell us about that relationship, if we know that they were, like, dating.
Yes, or that is from Charles Beauclerc's book. That's in there, his book about Nell Gwyn and Aphra Behn, and so yeah, that was based on at least an alleged kind of affair between that particular actress. So she's a younger actress as well, so a little bit, you know, she's the powerful writer at this point, and it's a younger, pretty actress she's had this affair with. So that's
like the sugar mama now.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a little bit of parallels between the sort of relationships that Nell had. Obviously, it's a different level with the king, and you know, in that conversation, Aphra calling out Nell when she's judging her for this, as you say, sugar mama relationship. You know, it's like, hang on a minute, you and the king, you know.
So was Aphra Behn, was she making lots of money off of her writing?
Oh God, no. I mean, it was a constant battle. So they would only earn money off the play if it got past a certain number of nights. So you'd write the play, and then if it got past a certain number of nights, then you would make a profit and you would start getting paid. So she had enough to live, and she had rich friends. So this is the other thing, isn't it? I was talking about the Arts Council at that time was having rich friends, essentially. You'd get invited to beautiful places, parties, you know, but essentially she had very little money. She was constantly on the brink of penury. She'd been in a debtor's prison not long after coming back from spying in Flanders in the Dutch wars, because King Charles did not pay her. You know,
she
yeah.
wasn't paying her spying.
No, not when she came back from the Dutch wars. So
wow.
she gets into all sorts of trouble there. Almost doesn't escape with her life.
Oh my gosh.
She finally gets back to London. And this is in her mid-20s as well. Imagine this, you know, she's gone on this extraordinary job in a foreign land. She's never been there before, doesn't know anybody. She's got kind of spy masters around her to help guide her, but essentially, you know, she's totally being used, you know, in a situation where she needs money. She needs to be the breadwinner, and she doesn't really know at this point how to earn money otherwise. And she gets back, and she's almost immediately thrown into debtor's prison.
Oh my god!
She has to wait to be finally paid. I think it's Thomas Killigrew who finally paid her debts.
Okay.
It's the same guy who ran the King's Theatre.
Yeah.
And then he invites her to play, but he just, King Charles didn't pay her for her spying, which was quite frequent at the time, because it was usually not professional spies who were paid. It was people who were aristocracy who would do the spying. You didn't need the cash.
So the aristocracy, they would just spy anyways, but they didn't really need to get paid because they were already rich, or?
Yeah, and it would be for the king. So of course we do that, and essentially they're getting their allowances for being nobility from the king, so they kind of owe anyway. So the fact that she wasn't paid wasn't, you know, massively unusual, I guess, at that time. But however, she had been promised a payment and she wasn't given it. So just imagine how terrified she would be at that age, and stuck in another country and not sure she can get back.
I just went to this prison right now in England.
Wow.
And so that's why I mentioned that, because, you know, later in her life, she manages, you know, by the skin of her teeth sometimes, to avoid penury and the streets. And then she, you know, theatre fashion has changed, like they do these days. You know, theatre goes in and out of fashion, and or you have a pandemic. You know, like the plague happens, theatre's shut or whatever. And so, and she gets into trouble as well. She got into trouble because she wrote satires that poked fun at the wrong people, which is covered in Oranges and Ink as well. So she was a staunch royalist, Afrabem, and she made the mistake of writing in one of her epilogues a criticism of the king's bastard son Monmouth, who was very popular and looked just like King Charles II, and nobody wanted James, Charles's brother, to become king after him because he was Catholic. So they wanted Monmouth to become the next king, and there was this rebellion, and Afrabem wrote about it in one of the plays. It was a prologue, and she was almost put in prison at that point as well, got into trouble. There's constant, you know, really fragile lives these women living, really, where constantly on a knife edge.
You just have to say the right things to the right people all the time.
But then, like, not even, because like when the king got sick, it was like she didn't even do anything, and then she's still like in this like perilous situation.
Very true.
Well, she, bizarrely enough, Nell Gwyn was the one who died in penury when Charles II passed away, and she almost went to debtor's prison, but it was only because James, who was then James II, fulfilled Charles' legacy. He said, "Please look after little Nell."
Aww.
He did actually give her a stipend so that she was okay, but she was still, you know, had very little money.
But at least she had the house. She owns the house, so she's not going to be like homeless. But yeah, and she died pretty young, right?
Yeah, she was very young. She was only in her sort of, she was about 40. So, you know, this is, you know, not that unusual for the time, of course. People did
Mhm.
die young, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Afra outlived her by not that long, actually. So, but, you know, Afra had one of her biggest successes just not long before her death.
Mm-hmm.
Bizarrely, this play called The Emperor of the Moon, which,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she'd changed her theatre style because, you know, she wasn't making much money from theatre, and she'd become a poet. She was, you know, writing pamphlets, anything she could make money on.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's thinking, okay, I'm going to go the same way as you know, Nell died before her. And then she had this massive success with this. She borrowed this style, the commedia dell'arte style from Italy. So, and she writes The Emperor of the Moon, and it's an out and out comedy. And she suddenly has this financial success right at the end of her life, really.
Oh, gotta go out with a bang. That's
There you go.
At least you got to experience some of it. Like sometimes people don't like get famous till like the long after they're dead.
yeah.
Well, that's it. I think that because of the fame that they both had, it was always precarious.
Mm-hmm.
It was always something that could be taken away because there were always critics, as you said. You know, well, I'd be interested as well that the critiques you looked at, the lampoons. Were there any particular anecdotes that stuck out, or?
They weren't really like anecdotes. It was just other playwrights kind of attacking her and then like seeing like some of her like rebuttals to those. So I got a sense of like her character, that she's not going to just be like walked all over kind of. But it seemed like the critiques were usually like really just like banking on the fact that she was a woman, and like not that she was a bad writer or anything. And so that just seems like a really frustrating thing to deal with, because it's like I can't really argue with that, like I am a woman. So
And she would, yeah, but she would also do that thing where she'd use her sex as well. How can I give a rebuttal to this, because I am a poor mere woman, and you know, really make them, you know, feel bad and stuff. You can tell, you think, this is dripping with sarcasm, surely. I think but using the kind of mores of the time, you know, to make people feel softened towards her and sympathetic.
Yeah. I have read some anecdotes, and also in the play, one of these came up of like with Nell kind of just really embracing the fact that she was a whore. And so I was wondering if you could tell us about that, when the scene where she's like in a carriage. I think she even like reenacts this.
Oh, that's another anecdote. Yes.
Yeah.
This is another sort of story that's told many times in lampoons. So as I mentioned before, there was another rival, a sort of posh rival, if you like, Louise de Carouel, and she was Catholic, and she was, you know, she's a foreigner. So, you know, English people at the time didn't like that very much. And so, and also there was a lot of a play, which I haven't mentioned yet, actually, it's set during the Popish plot. So it was a completely fictitious, made up plot. It's like the Daily Mail of the time. It's kind of like, or whatever the American version is of that. So like a real kind of, you know, sensationalist kind of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a political slant, had made up this Popish plot, which is about the Catholics are trying to kill the king.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous way to start.
And so there was a lot of really bad feeling dredged up. A guy called Titus Oates, who apparently found this document dating the Pope. And he was later found to be lying, and he was mentioned in the end of the play, he was actually punished for his lying and making up this, because lots of people basically died and were imprisoned.
Oh
my gosh.
Because of, you know, potentially being accused of being part of this Popish plot. And so going back to this anecdote, so we've got Louise de Carouel, who is Catholic. And one day, Nell is in a carriage, she's riding through London, and suddenly a whole kind of mob of people, of pelting the carriage with sort of vegetables. They're hitting on the windows. She's terrified. But her being her, apparently, she, sort of pulled down the window and heard, "Catholic whore, you Catholic whore." And then she put her head out the window and said, "Oh no, you're getting me mistaken. I am the Protestant whore." And they all calmed down. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, sorry, my bad.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So that story is all about what Oranges and Ink is about, in terms of the sort of, it's about a friendship, but it's also about the what was going on. It's a little bit Brexity, lots of sort of fake news kind of being pumped out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the whole Popish plot. I'm like, I can think of like a million examples in the past 5 years of things like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when I wrote the play, it was all around the referendum and Brexit, that was all happening, and as in the consequences of Brexit, leaving at that. And so there were lots of furore in the press. People were trying to stop it happening, and there's a lot of fake news going around. And so this play is kind of about the fake news of 1600s, if you like. So you've got this sort of Titus Oates character putting out lots of anti-Catholic propaganda. But yeah, it's also, everything in the play is sort of, I hope, done with a kind of light touch as well, so that it's, I think, being in the character of both Nell and Afra, I think it's just trying to find their voice within it as far as I can. We don't really know, do we? But it's sort of getting a sense of their way of dealing with quite serious subjects in a comedic way. So Nell could have dealt with that in a really terrible way, but she managed to kind of make light of it and not be murdered by a mob.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I feel like both of these women, like their wit and their humor, like really got them to the point, to the status they achieved, which is really, obviously now also like her beauty and like sex appeal, but it seems like she was like a really like witty and just fun person to be around, and it makes sense that like Afra would be drawn to that too.
She's like one of her protagonists,
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that gave me the idea, really, for the play, because as well as, connections.
Yeah. And did Nell ever appear in any of her plays? Did she ever act in any of them?
No. A lot of people, there is somebody who, it was called Nell Quinn. So people have thought that she did. I think it says on Wikipedia, or did say at one point, that Nell Gwyn was in one of her plays. She was never actually in.
Okay.
In fact, she'd stopped acting by the time that Afra was writing plays. She was already on.
Okay. I see. Yeah. So they didn't have any overlap, really. But that's nice. They were still able to become friends. I'm guessing, like, because they were both in the theater world at some point, it's probably how they got to know each other. Yeah,
but Afra was working at the theatre as a copier.
Oh, right.
So she's working there. She just hasn't had her first play yet. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like that was really great. I definitely know a lot more about each of them, and I now want to read a lot more of Afra Bain's stuff. I haven't read that many of her plays. I've read Orinoco and then a bit of her poetry, which I really like her poetry. But yeah, Marva, did you have any questions about either of them, or about like the play or anything?
No, I really want to like see your play first of all, because I haven't seen it, but
so have a look at the link. Everybody should look at the link. It's on Scene Saver. So Scene Saver is the website, and you can just sign up to Scene Saver and watch it for free at the moment, either of them.
Okay.
Find out more.
It's a double bill, so you can watch both plays. They're like back to back in the same thing. Yeah.
So it's The Masks of Afra Bain and Oranges and Ink, a double bill
Okay, cool. I love this so much. The like actress courtesan like kind of vibe is totally like what I love. And I love that she dedicated one of her plays to her, even if it was like kind of like a over the top. It's like cool to see. Like, yeah, they have like these like life stories that kind of take like similar paths, but then also like even if we don't know exactly like what their specific relationship was, you can like see it in these little ways of like, oh, her being inspired by like a character in a play, or like the dedication and stuff. I think that's so cool.
And those worlds definitely overlapped, the sort of the royal world and the well, the sort of the underworld of the royals, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
So it's the mistresses and the theatre world. The connection. It's an assignation place apart from anything else, isn't it? The theatre, Thank you for having me. And I guess I'm going to listen to your other podcasts now.
Yeah, enjoy them.
Yeah. Oh, I don't want it to end, but if you ever want to come back on, let us know.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I'll invite another play.
Yeah. This is Sistery.